thinking of something, we just never know what.
Again, it's worth it. It's the most dramatic change from the front of the school too, but the brightness of the hallways. I will say that I am, and Holly knows this, I'm not sure how the concrete floors came out. I think there was a better picture of it before. I think we thought we were going to look at the cabinet was going to come up and we we're going to have polished concrete floors, but evidently tiles that have been down there for 50 years leave ghost lines etched into the concrete. So, but we're running out of summer, so we have some plans for what next summer we'll do to those floors, but it's clean and it can be kept clean is the biggest improvement. Sorry.
Yeah. Woodford was all mechanical space. The ESSER funded HVAC project is nearly complete. We're waiting for the large piece of equipment to come get placed in the attic, and then that will be done. Monument in all the common areas now has new carpet. It's a very specific type of carpet that 20 years from now, it'll look exactly like it does today. It's in all the public spaces and common areas. And then some of the weather we got over the summer allowed us to take care of some limbs that needed to come down. So Mother Nature gave us a hand there and we painted up. But all things being equal, Monument's looking pretty slick. Shaftesbury, I've got new carpeting. They removed some big cabinetry in the classrooms and opted for smaller cabinetry with sinks in the classrooms to better use the space. The middle picture is the library at Pownell, new carpet there, and then we went through and stripped all the main floors and took off years and years of wax that I've accumulated and brought them back to their original finish. So it is much shinier. So the two scopes of work we have going on with the ESSER funded projects are the playgrounds and the HVAC. And I'm happy to report that we started construction this morning, actually yesterday. This playground is at Molly Stark. It is in addition to the existing, and that will be done by end of business tomorrow. It needs to sit for 2 days to let the poured plastic cure, and then it will be accessible. And then starting on Thursday and following right behind are the two playgrounds going in at Bennington Elementary. There's one that's completely new, and then there's one that's the K through 2 that we're taking all the existing elements out and repurposing the space to put new elements in. So that will also receive mulch and will be accessible. We are full speed ahead with the Bennington elevator. We're working with the contractor who is the lowest responsible bidder to get foundations and site work done this fall to take advantage of this lovely weather. And by this time next year, it will be functional and operational and paid for. And then the way more fun HVAC projects are all in different phases of planning, but we do have complete construction documents and designs for all of our elementary schools. And we're working with a construction manager to prioritize and make certain we're using it's much of the weather that we have now that's available before the snow flies to get stuff done. Any questions?
So the concrete walkways that look a little ragged right now are going to be addressed by next summer?
During next summer.
During next summer?
Then it will be put into the budget.
Oh, the concrete hallways?
Yeah.
Yeah, so two things. One is I'm working with the existing contractor who polished them to put a different finish on them. A lot like if you walk into Home Depot or Walmart, they have, it's another layer of sealant just to see if that's something you might be interested in. And then I'll work with both principals to see if they don't like that with the nice.
We're looking at other flooring options to be installed next summer.
The shine looks fine.
The shine looks fine. It's just the ghosting of the old tiles, but again, it's cleaner and healthier than what was there.
And the second thing, I know that in the spring you had anticipated the ventilation would be done hopefully over the summer, so what happened?
Yeah, so more than anything, like the rest of the world, we're understaffed and all the mechanical equipment was delayed. So the contractor that won that project has done all the interior work, all the grills are in, all the soffits are in. All we really need is the head ends for the air handling unit, the brains. Connect to that, and everything else in the building is already done.
But do you anticipate it to be done this fall?
Yeah, it should be within the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Any questions for parents?
For the gym cafeterium,
Gym cafeteria.
yeah, cafeterium, you said you guys were gonna be working on panels. About how long until the panels are put into the cafeteria?
So we are working diligently. A lot of the materials that are used for acoustic treatments are readily available. They're in stock. We just want to make sure we're putting in the right application for the right space. So I have 2 quotes right now. I'm waiting for a third to review with the team, and then we'll get those. I would imagine we get them installed by the holidays. So that's the intent.
You know what the noise decibel is right now in that cafeteria?
I don't know what the DBA is, but I do have the measuring equipment.
It's nice to see if we have a before and after during lunch, just to see if it works well, and then maybe you can consider for other schools.
Absolutely. So we just
Because we also have at least 3 other schools that have similar,
Yes.
heights with hard surfaces. Yeah. 4 too. Almost all music. But it's not as simple as just hanging acoustical panels. That there is calculations that need to take place for how many and size-wise for the space.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you, Director. It's fantastic. So that brings us to agenda item 8, which, as I said earlier, will not be holding tonight, tabling that for another night. Which brings us to a discussion of some more general policies. So we have 2 policies that we need to warn. There's the dress code, which is 5080, and the use of personal wireless communications, which is 5084. That's a modification. They both have some modifications, in fact, to existing policies. Just looking back at the history, it's been ages since we've looked at any of these. So some of it is updated with regard to new statute. Some is just updated to reflect the lived reality of our lives today. So I would entertain a motion to warn both of those policies, please.
A second. First it.
Okay, thanks, Priscilla.
I'll second.
Thanks, Susan. All right, do we have any discussion on warning policies 5080 and 504?
I had just a general question. I really didn't understand the dress code, what it means.
5080.
Yeah. So as I recall the conversation from the policy committee, this allows for sort of greater flexibility within the allowed realm of free speech and free expression, while also being really clear about the types of things that won't be tolerated. It talks here about marginalization of protected classes, for instance. That was not explicitly captured in the old policy, but it's an important thing to capture now. That answers the question for you.
I guess the old policy specifically stated what was acceptable and what is not. And without that ability to see it, I just was curious how parents would interpret or who becomes. Is it always the administrator that decides what is acceptable for each school?
That's a question I don't know the answer to. Superintendent Colkane, when it comes to the application of policy, who's the arbiter?
It would be the principal of the school.
Okay. And I would,
In reality, if it's a bigger school, it could be one of their associate principals who handles behavior, but ultimately the principal.
okay. And I would imagine, as with anything, if there are major discrepancies between how different principles apply on the same policy, ultimately there's a there's a process of complaint that could bring it to the superintendent or even the school.
It will often come to us for interpretation, and we will also consult with our attorney when I feel that it's necessary.
As a parent, I just found that it was a little bit difficult for me to understand what could, or what would be, or what may not be acceptable. And I guess that's what I was wondering about for the clarification, but maybe it's just me being sensitive to what I'm reading.
Okay, are there,
Well,
Couldn't hear what you said.
just being sensitive to what I'm reading and just wondering how, the interpretation happens. But if it could just be me.
are there specific modifications you would recommend?
I mean, personally, I feel like there should be guidelines. I mean, I can't walk with a hat and a hood on and sunglasses.
Well, that may come into the administrative regs that will be written after this policy is,
But I think
it's
it's
written.
seem to have it.
Policies are not that specific. We never write them that the administrative regs that go with it will be more specific, and then we'll often end up in a student handbook, which is really where parents should be referring to.
So, I mean, to be fair, like nearly 20 years ago, when we put this when this policy was adopted, there were those types of specifics. But again, I think the world in which we live changes. I mean, what is acceptable types of clothing, I think, changes over time. What this cuts to is, I think, a statement of the values of the district, specifically talking about respecting protected classes, while also allowing for societal change.
I mean, and ultimately, we're the board, we have to go to the lawsuit. And so I feel like we should have some skin in this game. I mean, if the administration come up with a policy, then we don't have to say. So if that
The
came off,
policy is written by the board.
but the policy, there's nothing in the policy, Jim.
Well, the administrative regs do not just get written by the administration and then put back. They will, as written, goes back to the policy committee.
And what's stopping, if you walk by the high school, even the number of AK-47 t-shirts you walk out of the high school, it's disturbing. And the guts and glories. I mean, they're going to school now. So who does that offend? And I guess that's the point, as a board, if somebody's offended, we have some right, because in the end of the day, we deal with lawsuits.
So fair enough. I think so what this policy addresses, though, is not the question of who gets offended or who doesn't get offended. The proposed policy adheres to decisions made by the Vermont Human Services Board in identifying what those protected classes, and I presume there's a parallel in federal law as well, I would presume. So I think, if anything, that does remove the question of, can I sue the board if I'm offended? Because what it removes the matter of personal taste and personal preference, and instead looks to law about who you can discriminate against, who you can't, or what messages you can portray on your clothing in public school. I mean, certainly I say that not to squash any discussion, and if there are particular recommendations, we can certainly send this back to the policy committee.
We have such a mix. I mean, if you look at what we have right now, Israel, you have Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel. Some of those protected groups, depend the side of the table you're on, you could argue both. Hamas is, they're a terrorist cell, but they're also representing Palestine, which is a group.
Sure.
So they both have, who is more right. I don't want to get stuck in some argument like that. So I want to make sure that we're looking at as a system.
I do want to say that our attorney has sent every policy before it goes before the policy committee, and she attends the policy committee meetings too. So, again, not trying to stop the discussion, just I want everybody to be aware of the process. It's not done in isolation of administrators writing policies. And the policies are, I don't know where this particular one had its start from, but it's the Vermont School Board Association that creates the model school policies that then we vote on and alter if need be, but those usually vetted by attorneys, so we do not necessarily have a wide change in policies as they're presented as written. I'm certainly not an attorney with that bubble to write that.
So could someone maybe help me understand, maybe the lawyer already thought about this. The last line states that the SVSU dress code is designed with a focus on teaching and learning. And I guess I don't understand in the words above it where that specific sentence shares that. Like how does the words that are written?
This is a warning, so if you have that many questions, then send it back. We can put the question, because I can't answer those in isolation. Sitting here, it really, there's questions that need to go back to the policy committee.
Is there an objection to that line, that final line?
No, I just don't,
It's just,
Like, how do you enforce?
there's nothing in there
how,
that addresses it. That last line.
And when we're saying we want kids to be, you know, freedom for students to express their individuality. So yes, I can wear a gun shirt to school. Pro gun. You know, I see it at the high school.
Okay.
When you drive by there. But yet, is it making it, people feel welcome to see that? Or does it make you feel safe? Some people are gonna say yes, some are gonna say no.
So I think, so going to the first question first, I mean, I read that final line as being almost the bookend partner to the opening line, which is saying the SVSU is committed to creating a positive learning environment for all students. And that talks about students feeling safe in their learning environment. And I see that final line as just being a coda to that. So that doesn't seem out of place to me. The question, Jeff, that you're raising about, can someone, wear a gun shirt or a Second Amendment shirt?
They are one.
They are.
So,
And how does that make somebody who died in a shooting?
Sure.
Which we know gun violence affects most people.
Totally, yeah.
Does it make you feel safe in school?
so are you looking for an addition to this policy that would address that specific point?
I mean, I think we have to consider it. What makes people feel safe? Is it be wide variance? Like somebody who is pro-gun might say, I deserve the right to wear this shirt.
Mhm.
And the person who's been affected by gun violence is going to say, I don't feel safe. So who's in the right there?
Yeah.
I think we have to make a, Confederate flag, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
It go both ways.
So let's kick, again, I'm inclined to give a response, but I'm not a lawyer, so
Yeah,
it doesn't
so-
matter what so my thought is this, my thought is that someone who has been affected by gun violence in their life, as tragic and horrible as that is, it is not a protected class. And that as long as a shirt is not actively advocating for violence, then arguably the simple presence of a fire, or the image of a firearm on a shirt.
So guns, guts, and blood, it's not,
I think what we're talking about is a
especially the AK-47.
but if it impacts my ability to
Learn.
learn,
Yep.
then
Because I'm distracted, is this person?
I don't know the answer.
Okay. So let's do this, and I think these are reasonable questions that and clearly the policy is not written in such a way to avoid them. So, Susan,
I got a question. Is it because of freedom of speech? Would the civil liberty come on if we made it so strict?
I
They would
think
come back
absolutely.
on us and
Yeah.
say, you're not giving them the freedom of speech?
Well, I think both the Vermont Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court have had plenty of decisions on the limitations that schools can place using their dress codes, which I think why rooting it in these legally protected classes makes sense, and only keeping it to that. But clearly, there are enough questions. We're all folks who are familiar enough with the way that educational policy works. And if we're having all these questions, then I think it stands to send back to the committee. So I think that's fine. I guess what I would ask is this, and Sandy and Jeff, since you've raised the most points during this conversation, but really anyone, but I would ask the two of you specifically, if you can send me some specific questions, some specific recommendations for this, I will bring those back to the policy committee. You can try to get those.
In advance of this meeting, may have some of those questions. I guess the minutes.
Yeah, they may. Particularly as the two of you, we're only just now talking about this, so I think as the two of you, but really as any of you are thinking about this more in depth, feel free to send those back.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Of course. So there's not So I think we still need to do this according to Robert's Rules of Order. Does anyone want to make a motion to warn policy 5080? Going once, going twice, okay, going thrice. I think that covers this according to Robert's Rules. So that brings us, I would entertain then a motion to warn draft policy 5084. That's the personal use of wireless communication. It's one of the two we have to warn, so.
That just streamlines, but I'll make the motion for it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. Any discussion on warning 5084? All those,
That's just saying any type of wireless communications, any type of transfer of data over.
yeah, it primarily updates
Anytime.
definitions,
Yeah.
yeah. Because again, that one was written ages ago, and the changes, when was that written? Yeah, it was written 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, right, yeah. I'm gonna use my BlackBerry to, okay, so we have a first and a second and no conversation that I heard, so all those in favor of warning policy 5084, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that is a warning. Great, and then that brings us to 3 other policies that we've already warned, that we've already discussed to a certain degree. Those are policies 2401, which is access control and visitor management. It's folks coming in and out of the buildings. Draft policy 2470, which updates regarding fire and emergency preparedness drills. And lastly, draft policy 3100 regarding transportation. We've warned these all at different dates, but let me check that. We've had these in our hands since this summer. And so I would entertain a motion to approve these 3 policies.
So moved.
Thanks, Brian. Do I have a second, please? Thanks, Sam. So we have a first and a second. Any discussion about adopting 2401, 2470, and 3100? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting those 3 policies, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And again, I will contact Leon regarding 5080. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 10, the superintendent's reports. Lieutenant Colquhoun.
I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Mark Thoreau and Director of Best Student Support Services, Dr. Pete Abbott, present the first part of my report. SVSU Recovery Pillar 1, social, emotional, and health and well-being of our students. Last month we got another pillar of the SVSU recovery. Just going to ask, let them give their complete report, hold questions, and then direct questions to the chair of committee, rather than like directly at them, and then let them go through that process. And Assistant Superintendent Woodrow, and the floor is yours.
Thanks for having us. This is year 3 of our presentations linked to recovery in Pillar 1. And we want to pause because the team that creates this presentation continues to grow. And this morning we were lucky, Dr. Abbott and I sat with our lead clinician, our lead counselor, actually there's 3 of them, our lead behaviorist, our lead nurse, and we reviewed, again, through their lens, this work because they all represent groups that are attached to the social, emotional, health and well-being work that we've done with recovery. So we're gonna highlight what's new and different this year. So there are things that are reoccurring themes, and we're re-familiarizing you with the information. We also tried to highlight, especially this year, where items are grant funded. So please pay particular attention, especially to the ESSER funding, because we know that our ESSER funding expires in September 2024. The acronyms are the same other than the last 2, Family Emergency Services, which is we refer to as FES usually, and then PUC, which is the Psychiatric Urgent Care for Kids, are both through our community partner, United Counseling Service. As a reminder, there is a recovery link on the SVSU website, and there is a link that you can always provide feedback in this final year. Our health and wellness information is linked to the Vermont Transferable Skills, Clear and Effective Communication, Creative and Practical Problem Solving, Informed and Integrative Thinking, Responsible and Involved Citizenship, and Self-Direction.
So this next page covers our RSIE data. That's the student risk screening scale for internalizing and externalizing. Internalizing behaviors include anxiety, depression, and withdrawal. And externalizing behaviors are more acting out, defiance, and aggression. So as you can see, this is the first year we've actually been able to provide you with beginning of year and end of year comparison data for 2022-23. And as you can see with our internalizing scores, about a third of our students since the pandemic are at risk of anxiety and depression and withdrawal since the pandemic. And in the externalizing chart, we have a small but persistent percentage of students who are at high risk of externalizing across the district.
So we've been able for the last 3 years to track the number of intakes. So as part of my role, I'm the designated homeless liaison. So I'm responsible for our intakes. And so we just sat and did our count for this year, and you can see that for pre-K to elementary, so far this year, I've completed 33 individual intakes, and at the secondary level, I've completed 26. So under instruction, again, we are continuing just to implement where we've placed our investment, and we know that things take time, so we continue instructionally at the Tier 1 level to focus on positive behavior intervention supports and using second step, which was originally funded through Title IV, and zones of regulation, which is supported through our ESSER grant. We also continue to work closely to implement our health and physical education curriculum linked to national standards. This is the same for our K through 3 and 4 through 5 or 6, depending on the grade range in the schools. And along the same line with professional learning, you'll notice a consistent theme. The goal is to offer opportunities, and what we're noticing is that a teacher 1 year might take Trauma 1 with Dave Melnick, who was funded through our ESSER grant, and then the next year we'll take some of John Kidda's trainings linked to restorative practices. New this year, we want to highlight that our administrative team now has 5 sessions with John Kidda and restorative practices. They started the beginning of September, and we are 2 sessions in, and so that is happening monthly right now. You'll also notice on the list that trauma drumming has just continues to take off in our district. And so we've opened the door, and we have classroom teachers that are participating in the training and then finding ways to use these strategies at morning meeting in their classrooms or through individualized sessions with children.
So our next slide talks about Tier 3 and 4 interventions for social, emotional, and behavior. And we've been consistently building and implementing our Tiers 3 and 4 interventions. I'll highlight what's new this year. In the first box, you'll see we have mental health services to support anxiety and depression. And our community partner, UCS United Counseling Service, has a new intensive outpatient program in our community that allows children to access intensive mental health supports while in our community, and they no longer have to go to the hospital as often to receive those supports. So that's called IOP, and we have a number of learners participating in that. We are maintaining our CPI supports and our crisis consult team. We've maintained our on-point intervention, although on-point intervention is operating out of the Beach Street site this year. Our BCBAs, our board certified behavior specialists, and FBAs are maintained this year from last year. And I do want to note that one of our BCBA staff is ESSER funded, so you want to pay attention to that. And then in the ideals grid in Tier 4, ideals has moved this year for the elementary building from Molly Stark to Monument School. to make room for a New England Center for Children school program. And we are seeing an increase in the number of learners coming into our district with autism spectrum disabilities, both this year and expected next year. And so we have had to increase and expand our programming for learners with autism spectrum disabilities, including that new classroom that we opened this year.
So the last few pages, you'll notice are, again, we've highlighted the last couple of years, staffing patterns to support social, emotional, and behavior in each building. And so you'll again notice the funding sources. We do want to point out under Bennington Elementary, the one shared board certified behavior analyst is actually funded through Medicaid. So just make a note on your handout. We made a note up here. We've had many eyes on this all day. So there's a few minor adjustments that we've made. But again, you'll notice that different positions are funded through grants. And then new at Monument this year, which were board requests last year, there is a new school community liaison and a new behavior interventionist to support the children at Monument Elementary School. And at Shasbury Elementary School, next to the board certified behavior analyst, that is also a position funded through Medicaid. So just make a note on your handout about that piece. You'll also notice at Woodford Hollow, there is a school counselor now that's shared with Monument that's providing services to students there and being able to support those needs. And then a school-based clinician or school psychologist can be assigned as needed. The other big change under additional elementary level supports, we had a large request from the field last year. Jessa Ordway was our one behavior social emotional coach, and we never knew we needed her, and now we don't know what we would do without her, and to the degree that we needed another one. And so we found a way with our Title IV money, and it was approved by the state. We did receive enough funding, so now we have two of those positions, and their goal is to really go into the classroom and support teachers, especially with implementing morning meeting and using some of the strategies you saw above linked to trauma and restorative practices. So Jessa is excited to have a partner in her work, and so they've been going out and partnering. So those are the big changes. And so just to again summarize our goal tonight, this is our official last year of under the recovery umbrella, and this is an update for you linked to the work we're doing connected to social emotional health and well-being to support our students. Thank you so much.
Question I have, looking forward, is maintaining services that are in place with the understanding that ESSER money is going away. What sort of flexibility is there within the existing Title IV funds, the IDEA funds, to reallocate those funds to just figuring out how we want to maintain as many of these services as we can in the absence of ESSER funds? What is the flexibility to do that?
So we have a task force here meeting now that has looked at all federally funded positions that are in danger of losing funding and how we can absorb that as we get into the budget season and make recommendations to individual boards. Looking at existing openings which we have quite a few that could then be shifted. So sitting here tonight, I don't have that answer, but to tell you that we did put an administrative task force together who is looking at, and it's being very sensitive to the fact that we're talking about people's future livelihood. So it's a small core group who I asked that they all signed a statement of confidentiality.
Do you have a sense as to when the work of that group, or at least the primary set of recommendations from that group will be done?
In time for the budget. Yeah. That's really where the impact is at. But I think we've made some substantial progress with that. So yeah, I'm feeling much better. Surprise, our director of HR did a wonderful spreadsheet to start that process of here's everybody, here's where they're paid for, where they're paid from, what their role is, where we see potential openings already in the budget that about expanding. So, yeah, and we all came away from that meeting, those who were involved. Like I said, it's a small group, but we know we're meeting, but how they do, but.
All right, thank you for that. So, and with regard to the superintendent's request earlier about questions going through that chain, I would invite the board members to direct those questions to the superintendent.
And just, I know I mentioned last one, the SVSU, just if we get qualifications and job expectations for some of these positions, it makes it easier to try to justify. Because I still don't know what some of these people do or what their qualifications are. And there's a difference between board certified behavior analyst, they had the scoring, they would have.
We did bring that back to the team that after the SU meeting with that request for you, that
I just want to make this team know, because that would really impact how we decide to the ESSER fund individuals is, not getting highly skilled individuals, and, should we look elsewhere?
Just a quick question about the data. Is this SWIFT data? How did we determine what the risks were between the fall and the spring?
So this was the SSRSIE, which is a district benchmarking tool that we give twice a year, most rarely times.
Where does the data come from? I think it's the question.
Yeah, it's a teacher recorded. It's through the University of Kansas. It's part of our MTSS work. It's on our comprehensive assessment system. And so there is a set normed way that we implement the assessment.
So all of the elementary schools?
In the SVUESD? Yes.
I think looking to board meetings ahead, I know when I first started serving on boards, which is a lot of years ago, I guess at this point, we spent a lot of time talking about PBIS, but I don't think we've discussed it within this particular makeup of the board. So I think it's at a board meeting not too far from now, I think what I'd like to see is a wider presentation on PBIS, please, just to see what it looks like these days and what we talk about. I think the same goes for a discussion on the restorative practice. I think there's been a lot of time spent on building that capacity within our schools and our teachers, our administrators. So I'd love to hear more about these.
And when we were preparing for this evening, I find this document is very helpful that it's all that so much information is one location. I know it was just handed out to you tonight, so you may want more time, but particularly I think it's page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually page 6, where it starts with the on point intervention. The process, the whole page before that, where it's the whole tier 3 social emotional, the process of how all this works, particularly in the description and the criteria, finding it in one place, if we can expand more on that, is just, it shows you more like what, there's a guide in all our MTSS manuals for principals that look, here's the problem I'm having, here's the resource that you can go to. But some of those manuals, it's one of my concerns with it, is like how big it is in a time of a crisis to go. The answers are all there, but whenever you can put it on a smaller, quick reference guide, which what this is more helpful, particularly in a time of a crisis. Like you read this and you say, like, how does a student end up in on point? How does that recommendation happen? And that process is here. How does a student at Beach Street first they're sending school, and the protections that have to be in place before that happens? Because for us, it's very important to keep students in the least restrictive environment. It's not only the law, but it's something that we all believe in. And so I don't want anyone to ever think that it just happens, that the principal calls up and says, Jim, I need to get a kid over Beach Street. Okay, that may happen, but it doesn't happen because there is a process.
There's a lot of data behind it as well, that long documents the need for that service.
Right. Yeah, and how the district referral team works, all that. So it's a real thorough process. Capacity probably remains our challenge, and staffing for these interventions remains a challenge.
I think we
you brought up a great point that there's a lot in this document that was shared. And I would love the opportunity to have the document before we have a meeting so that I can at least look through it. And if I had questions, I could, I'm not distracted by trying to listen to you and read this document at the same time. So could I ask that we have handouts in advance before our meeting so we have a chance to.
If they're available, I have no problem.
If we could work to have those available.
Yeah, there are some that I'm not going to do that because I think they need to be delivered with an explanation too. So I'm sometimes reluctant to put something in a package because it's not, remember, that packet just doesn't go to you. It goes out into public. So I like that it's presented with an explanation. And if you do have questions afterwards, I'd be happy to answer or at a subsequent meeting as opposed to sending out something without an explanation. I hear your point about having it in advance to read, but it doesn't always work either.
So fair enough. I guess my response to that is sure. Yes, I can see when it wouldn't work. At the same time though, there's always going to be an opportunity for people to maintain a lack of being informed around this, right? And so whether or not it comes with an explanation, I don't know necessarily should be a reason why we don't circulate.
And it also is, there was changes being made in this.
Sure, that happens, yeah, right, and that happens too.
Are these documents shared in the meeting minutes, Richard, so we can,
Yes,
Yeah.
Richard will get it out to me. Yeah, he'll send it in.
so this will sit in the meeting minutes?
Yeah.
So, but I certainly agree that having it ahead of time, and with that said, what the superintendent just said about questions, for sure, but also, it also remains open that if board members want to see something on the agenda, just let me know. We can bring it up for wider conversation. Absolutely. I don't think I've ever said no to that, to a board request for something on the agenda. So,
I have a question for the CPI fees. So you're on the same page, right?
Yep.
Are there opportunities for families to provide feedback with some of the CPI practices?
In what way? Like, could you give an example? Like, what would they be giving feedback on?
Feedback on maybe how like, let's say, EPI was administered to one of the students, and let's say a bruise appears later on in the evening. Is there an opportunity for the families to be able to come to the CPI trainer or whomever it is to say, hey, this is what I noticed that was on my child, just for feedback?
Well, my experience is that is almost always reported to the principal and to the nurse. So as far as to the CPI trainer directly, I don't think that would be in the process, but I don't know if any of you are more involved with that.
So I think there's a misconception around CPI that it's a physical restraint, and CPI is 3/4 of CPI is all de-escalation, verbal de-escalation strategies. So our teachers are trained in the verbal de-escalation component of CPI, but some individuals working in more intensive situations are trained in the physical as well. And as part of the process, parents, if there has to be a physical intervention, parents are informed that day verbally, and they are offered an opportunity for a meeting to debrief any physical intervention that is done. So that is part of, if a family has been.
It's an hour. I mean,
That's a standard
that has to happen.
4,500,
Right.
so they have to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
When would a physical or come in? Like if a kid stayed in like circle time, can't sit still, would you expect that kid to be held down? Or would you let
course
them
not.
wander?
No.
So, if they're contently sitting in the corner, sitting away from the group, we let them sit away from the group, contently, as long as they're quiet and behave themselves. So where does that change from that verbal to that physical? Because for me, I don't
It's
understand.
in danger to themselves or others. And that is a strict definition. It's not just like you think they're,
If they're throwing a laptop across the room, that justify it.
Maybe not even then.
No.
Yeah, I'm recalling circumstances we've had, that this board has dealt with where
I'm a CPI trainer in another SU, so first up, there's 1,000 verbal de-escalation techniques to employ first. Second, there's the ability to block someone just by using your body. Hands-on restraint of any form is your last resort. So if you've gotten to that point, either you may be being physically hit by a child, or they may be so out of control that they're hitting somebody else. So that's really the only time that comes. It's the last resort.
Presenting on something.
Yep. And that's the CPI's vision with which we're training other people to do it.
They're running into a wall,
Mhm.
self-injure.
Yeah.
So it's a really a physical component that's injuring themselves or other with justified potential restraint.
It's out there. Let's go about without getting too graphic.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Do the parents get notified their child has been restrained?
Yes.
Any other questions for our district? Great, thank you. Right.
A few other items, Michael. One, I have from the Director of Finance, the warrants for you all to sign. And two updates. You approved a contract with New England School Development Council to do a building use study. Had my first phone call with them last week, and then I have a new meeting scheduled for tomorrow to finalize the process of what the project is going to look like. So I assume coming out of that meeting tomorrow will be, I will have a timeline for the project and the scope of who else is going to be interviewed for that. School safety officers, that closed on Monday. The applications we did, the director of the SVSU safety coordinator, the HR director, and I met today and did a screening of who met the qualifications. I think there was close to 40 applications for those positions. Wish we got a response like that for administration and teaching staff. So we think we have a real good core of qualified candidates. So we will reached out to principals today to see which elementary principals would like to be involved in those initial interviews. And I hope that I will be making recommendations to you at your next board meeting in November. The interviews are going to be scheduled 25th, 26th, and 27th of this month. That's the proposal that we got. Everyone else has to come back and can they meet it, but that's where we're started with those dates for the interviews. That we'll have recommendations to you by your November board meeting.
Any questions for our superintendent? Okay, that brings us to a chair report. So just very briefly, I've said this, I think, to some of you individually, but just wanted to say it for the whole group and for CATCV and anyone else who wants to listen. I think, I've served on board for a handful of years at this point, and the fact that people are willing to volunteer their time and hopefully, be of service to the kids in the community, I think is always wonderful. I think there's a great balance to this board. I think that there's a breadth and a wealth of experience from different areas that we haven't necessarily seen represented on the board in recent times. And I just feel really fortunate. I think while I don't know we're always 100% on the same page, I think this board in particular has demonstrated an ability to disagree agreeably, which I think is critical for coming to consensus and being able to work together. So I just wanted to put that out there for everyone to hear because it's something that I'm really pleased with regard to this board. So moving on to agenda item 12, which is our final agenda item, just a few FYI notes. The student enrollment report is always important for us to take a look at, as well as our budget status. So both of those were posted. So with the agenda exhausted, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So I just want to throw one thing out there. We're entering that time of the year. We have to start getting names in for elected officials. So if people are interested, they should probably consider it. Because those are going to close in sometime in January.
So with that said, that's an excellent point, and we'll call this part of the chair's report still. I think it's important for people to take a look. We'll take a look at that. Folks should take a look at when their term ends, because so it looks like if the website is correct, Susan, Scott, and myself, our terms are up at the end of this year. So if any or all of the three of us want to continue to serve, you'll need to get as well as anyone else who might want to run for those positions, you'll need to get a petition from their town clerk. I believe the threshold is 100 signatures by registered voters in order to get on the ballot. And yeah, there it is. So thank you for that reminder, Jack. And certainly anyone else who is interested in serving, please sign up.
I think it's post-COVID, we used to 25 signatures.
Is that right?
Or less.
Okay.
Alright. So I think it jumped back up to the 100.
Okay. I think I skated through those COVID years. It must have already been.
All you had to do was put your name in.
Okay. So
it is more harder to do.
okay. So yeah, thanks for raising that. That's part of the chair report.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. So do we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Like that motion.
Thanks, Susan. Do we have a second for that?
Yes, I
Thanks, Michelle. Any discussion about adjourning? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We are closed. Thanks, everyone.